Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. A lot happening on this Monday morning, so I don't want to waste too much time. Let's get started right now. Yeah, that was an interesting moment in court last week when the prosecutor actually questioned the defendant. Todd, did you say cheating whore? And he said no, but he didn't give another explanation for what he said. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a minute. Joining me right now to break all of this down is two special guests, criminal defense attorney Joseph Tully and retired LAPD Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. Great to have you both here. Joseph, let me start with you. The jury has been deliberating for about 2.5 hours. They were sent home last week, and they're going to continue today. 2.5 hours. Does that tell you anything about which way they're leaning?
It really doesn't. Every jury's different. And you really can't predict anything. The only thing that you can predict is that everything's going to be unpredictable. A lot of times in a serious case, before anything happens, the jurors want to at least review certain evidence and then discuss it, talk about their feelings towards the case.
Yeah, look, at the one hand, looks like they're giving this some careful consideration. There's a lot of things they have to consider here. And Cheryl, one of the things they have to consider was the defendant taking the stand. We might have an opportunity to play a little bit more of that later, but your opinion, you're around suspects, you were around suspects your entire career. What did you make of his demeanor, the things that he was saying on the stand? Did he seem credible to you?
Well, listen, that's the risk you take when you get on the stand as a defendant, because while he may have been able to explain away some of what occurred, some of what was said, he didn't have an explanation for that cheating whore comment. It's problematic for me.
All right, well, let's play that right now. I'm glad you led perfectly into that. Let's hear that 911 call, and you're going to hear when he's questioned about it under cross-examination. Okay, so, Joseph, let me ask you this. The jury gets to hear that. They get to make a determination themselves. Wouldn't it have been great if the defendant says, no, I didn't say that. What I did say was maybe something else, like some more or something that sounds like that, but he didn't give an explanation. Even his attorneys, when they had an opportunity to question him about it, they didn't say, Todd, were you saying maybe this, X, Y, Z? So now the jury's left with him just denying it. What do you make of that?
Well, I could only hear it a little bit on the first time, and you could kind of hear what the prosecution is saying, but I'm not sure that that it's going to be clear to all the jurors. And I hope the prosecution didn't, base their whole case on, you have to hear this, and if you heard this word, then you have to vote guilty, and if you didn't hear it, then you have to acquit, because it was a little unclear. But a lot of times with defense work, you don't have an explanation for everything. He doesn't know what he said, and I don't know how the defense cleaned it up or not. If they cleaned it up and said, were you panicked? Yes. Did you know everything that you were saying at the time? Yes. Did you hear the exact words the prosecution just talked about? No. I think that would have been a decent reply.
From what I recall, they kind of hinted on that. I think you clarified it much better than what we heard last week. So I'm curious to see where the jury sits on that. Again, they're going to continue the deliberations today. Cheryl, let's say he did say that. Let's say he really did do this and that, he killed his wife. The question, of course, is, and this is where I'm left with, if you take everything the prosecution said, that this guy has been boiling for a year, look at the Google searches about different ways to kill someone, and looking about cheating, and this was going on these Google searches for a year. The way that he picks to kill his wife would be on his own property, in his own shed, with their own corn rake, with no one else around. That's the way you do that, and then you catch yourself on a 911 phone call saying cheating whore. I mean, it seems to be very sloppy. So is that not a little bit of reasonable doubt right there, that this is the way a man would get rid of his wife? It seems to be a way just to get yourself be found convicted.
Well, listen, people don't commit perfect crimes, right? That's why they often get caught, because they forget some of those minute details, and you can't be very specific in your explanation, whether it's during an interview or during a trial, if you choose to testify and then get vague and not remember certain other details that are incriminating. It just leaves one to ask, then, like you mentioned earlier, if you didn't say cheating whore, what did you say? And to have no offer, no other explanation, makes one believe, then let me fill in the blank and assume that this is what he said.
Right. And there was another big part of this, Joseph, the Google searches, right? He said that he didn't search a lot of those things that someone else had access to his iPad. But he had, if I remember this correctly, a flip phone. So really, if he wanted to look on the internet, he would use that iPad. The other people in the house had phones that they could have looked up, done Google searches. Now, there were searches that very easily could have been attributed to Amy, things that were very personal in nature to a woman, and that maybe perhaps that he wouldn't have searched for those things. But do you think the defense did a good job at saying he didn't look up these other things? Because at the end of the day, you have a computer, you have an iPad, it's in a home, there's multiple people, but who else is going to be looking at this stuff besides him?
Well, I mean, to answer that question, the defense could have put forth she had multiple affairs on her husband. Maybe she didn't like him very much. Maybe it was her. His explanation of, we would watch historical documentaries and then look up topics related to what we watched on TV. That was an explanation, and I suppose that's under reasonable doubt. That could be a sufficient explanation as long as the case in whole also supported that explanation. Here, I'm not sure that it's going to be enough to really raise reasonable doubt in this case.
Cheryl, let me ask you this. We also saw the inclination that perhaps an alternative suspect was this guy, Jerry Frazier, the man that she was having an affair with. But in your career, most of these kinds of cases, is it the person who's being cheated on, or is it the person who is having the affair that is ultimately the prime suspect? Is it the person who is actually, the husband or the wife who's being cheated on, or is it that other party? Is it the boyfriend, the girlfriend on the side? I mean, which makes more sense in the cases you've seen?
Typically, listen, it could go either way, but typically, if the boyfriend is going to commit a crime of murder, it would make more sense, and often we see they kill the spouse, the mate of that other person, to free them up now so that they can be together. They don't kill the person that they're in the relationship with. That kind of defeats the whole purpose, right?
And I know motive isn't an element of a crime, but it does tell a story, and you just said it right there. It doesn't make sense. Look, the prosecution told a very believable, credible story that we see so many times. A person's his wife was cheating on him. He could have lost a lot in a divorce. He could have lost the farm. We see the messages. We see the 911 call. We heard him on the stand. There's a lot for them to consider, and there's a lot for us to consider. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about what happened last week, including the defense's closing argument. Stay tuned.